Hi everyone, welcome to a very special edition of the BC Poly Hotstove. I have thrown away my shackles, otherwise known as McLean K, and I have finally upgraded the co-hosting on this show. It has taken a long time, but we are finally here. I'm Jordan Bateman, Vice President Communications for the Independent Contractors and Businesses Association, and I am pleased to be joined in the first of the great Unspun Hotstove crossover switcheroos by...
George Affleck. What am I doing? Where am I? How did I get here?
Oh, George, no Jody to save us now. No McLean to rein me in. It is just you and me, unfiltered.
I saw some people on Twitter saying, "Oh well, now Jordan and George, Jody's keeps control of George." And I'm like, "What? No, actually, she doesn't." But okay, we'll go with that.
Well, now we can secretly launch our secret municipal slate of retired councillors, which will be great. And we'll start all sorts of. We'll start all sorts of rumors. But George, I got to ask you because obviously you know the city of Vancouver far better than I do. They put out a slide deck last week. The mayor, Candy Stewart, gets up and talks about how dire things are in Vancouver. And no doubt, it's not great in Vancouver. But in the slide deck, they claim a $27 billion drop in revenue. We later find out that no, it was supposed to be 27% and $2 billion. Which of the 43? I worked it in.
Oh, nice.
I'm so excited.
Yeah.
Which of the 43 communication staffers have lost their job over the $27 billion slideshow error? Did I get that right?
Oh my God. It was a total miscommunication of epic levels. And just another one of the many flubs that this mayor has been making in this coronavirus world we live in. It's amazing how badly he's performing. Generally, politicians are supposed to do quite well. They actually, popularity in crisis usually goes up because the opposition's kind of, all right, well, I'm not going to say anything, so because that would be bad. And in this case, the mayor's managed single-handedly to make himself look like he's completely out of touch with reality. Doesn't know how operations work at City Hall. Doesn't understand how the budget works. Doesn't understand how financials work. Doesn't understand that the city's allowed, Vancouver specifically, is allowed to run deficits because of the way the charter is. He doesn't seem to, he has obviously communications people that are challenged. You just wonder what is going on. And, he'll do an announcement and then a contradictory thing will happen at council the next week. You're like, are you not attending the council briefings? It doesn't appear he is because he seems to be out of step with the rest of council. It's so bizarre and so dumbfounding.
Yeah. And George, last week you mentioned this on Unspun. And I mean, as a former municipal councillor myself, I was shocked that councillors and a mayor would not take advantage of a briefing ahead of time to get your notes and figure out ask the questions that sometimes we're councillors, you're not an expert in every field. Sometimes you ask dumb questions that you don't really want out in public, but you kind of want to work through these issues. Why isn't he taking advantage of that? It's so shoddy not to do your homework.
Well, the housing announcement specifically, that was, okay, you're doing a housing announcement. Everybody was wondering if it's going to be an announcement about restaurants and small businesses, and he comes out about housing and housing crisis. I'm going, housing crisis? Yeah, okay, that still exists, or does it actually? Because, you see some stories came out yesterday about seeing strata pricing and of homes going down by 25% over the next year and a half or so. And that rentals are going skyrocketing because obviously Airbnbs are gone and all these people who were using units for whatever long-term rentals. So all the housing crisis, I don't want to quote Justin Trudeau, but sometimes these things do solve themselves when we talk about when the economy crashes. These things tend to provide affordability on their own. And it's not the best way to create affordability. And the city of Vancouver certainly has not done a very good job over the years in creating housing in a way that's productive and quick. And that created a lot of the crisis. But now we're facing a situation where we have no tourists, all these Airbnbs. We have the construction is continuing, which is great. But
immigration is going to plunge.
What's that?
Immigration is plunging,
Immigration plunges, cross-province immigration, migration, all those things are sort of having an impact. So it's interesting. But I saw another story about the Valley and there being an interest now in growth in individual, single-family homes, your kind of lifestyle. Not mine because I'm a downtown kind of person, but I grew up in the Valley. And so that's interesting to see that there's this heated movement from urban professionals in the downtown who've been living in condos are going, oh, maybe this is my chance to move to the burbs and potentially work from home. But
Yeah.
anyways, the mayor seemed to be out of touch with anything that's really going on out there as far as how we're all feeling right now and what we want from leadership.
Yeah. Yeah. It is odd. It's odd in this environment. Like you'd think mayors would be performing better, being closer to the people, having a better understanding of what's going on. You have a highly developed sense of the local economy, the local networks, all of that. But mayors are kind of performing badly compared to governors slash premiers. Like you think of New York, De Blasio gets ripped to shreds constantly, but Andrew Cuomo is regarded as a hero. Here the provincial government's handling, by and large, is kind of skate through. There's not been a lot of criticism of it, and the proof is in the numbers, right? 2 cases yesterday. But the mayors, I don't know, the mayors seem to have given in to local pressure. I'm not sure. Like playgrounds, parks are still closed in some places.
Yeah, well, should have never happened in the first place. I think that what the interesting thing is, I think what the mayors don't understand quite often is their role and responsibility. And so for so many years now, especially in Vancouver, the council has been so focused on healthcare, like drug addiction, all those kinds of things, and housing. These are two, and price of housing and all that kind of stuff, and homelessness, and all these things that are not necessarily in the purview of a city council. And so now, though, in this crisis, the federal government has been focused on the economy, on how do you, the crisis of how do you pay your staff, and then the provinces have been in charge of healthcare. So they've had carried those roles to do, which is their job, and not the role of the city. But now, as we head into phase 2, and we're in phase 2 and phase 3 of going back to normal, it really does get more focused on municipal government. I think it's really about, okay, what do we need to do on the ground to help small businesses and medium-sized businesses succeed? Taxation is one thing, but speed and process and all those things, and most of that stuff, access, things like internet, whatever it might be, a lot of that is municipal government. And I don't see a lot of leadership coming from any municipal leader focusing on the next phase of, and I'm a small business owner, and I'm wondering, the City of Vancouver did nothing for me in the last 3 months at all. And now I'm waiting for them to do something for me moving forward, or any small business. We see some stuff with restaurants. There's going to be some research. There was a couple of motions at council last week about staff report back. Oh my God, just get to work. And I thought it was interesting, and we'll probably get into Brad West in a little bit, but there was a story yesterday about Brad West, and I tweeted it out, and in POCO, focusing on how do we help restaurants open up their patios. We'll actually provide you with staff support to build and put your stuff in place as quickly as possible. That is nimble thinking. That is what any municipal government. How do we help you literally on the ground today to get shit done?
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. And I think smaller town mayors may realize like they can't afford to have 25% of their businesses shutter. Like they're out of work. That they have got to do something in order to keep that livability quotient. And look,
it's not about taxation, though. It's not about taxation, because they'll get the taxes. That's what bugs me about this argument that then go back to your comment about the slide presentation, and they'll screw up with the numbers, and the mayor is saying we're going to be bankrupt. It's such BS, because cities get the taxes no matter what. They get the taxation from properties. Whoever owns the property has to pay the tax. And so if you don't pay the tax, guess what happens? You foreclose as a city on the piece of property, and you own that piece of property, or you sell it. And get your taxes that way. There's no way you have to pay your taxes. Yeah. And so that revenue source is guaranteed. Now, parking and all those other things, sure, but property taxes, you're getting that cash. Don't worry about it. Now focus on how do we help to make sure those businesses in those offices and retail spaces survive and succeed.
Yeah, no, exactly right. I do think this is where the provincial government may come under some criticism in the months to come as businesses fail and as more rent comes due. And the Financial Post today coined a term, the deferral cliff, where essentially, provinces have not been forgiving taxes. Like they're not forgiving PST, they're not forgiving the employer health tax. It's coming due. It's just been punted down the road. WorkSafe premiums are all coming due at about the same time. And if these businesses don't find their feet fast, you're going to see, forget a second wave of the pandemic, you're going to see a second and a third wave of bankruptcies.
Yeah, that's scary. And I hope a lot of those businesses took advantage of the loans that were available, which were quite easy to get for most businesses. I don't like borrowing money, but I certainly filled in the forms and got the money just in case. If I don't need it, I'll pay it back. But I'd rather have that than owing government money. as far as taxation or anything like that. If I have to take a year to pay those things, or 2 years as opposed to 3 months, then those opportunities that the federal government provided were good ones. But it is I've never held debt as a company, and it bugs me that I potentially have to do that. And deferral is absolutely debt. It's debt that you owe and you have to pay it. And cash flow is king in business. And how do you help companies have solid cash flow ongoing? That's the challenge that we have, any business has right now, because you're sitting on massive rents and massive payroll and this and that. And that's going to be the challenge once all these things end and you have this money that you've deferred and you have to pay your staff all their full levels again. Can you survive? And that's the question that we have. That's the big unknown.
Yeah. And you mentioned restaurants. They're in the worst case scenario where they can only have 40-30% of their capacity. It's a small margin business anyways, high volume, small margins. It'll be interesting to see what happens. While we're talking about that, let's talk about who kind of fell through the cracks of the government pandemic funding, especially federally. I was shocked that neither Trudeau nor Horgan did much to bail out TransLink in this. And I do wonder, people think I'm anti-transit. I'm not, but I do wonder what the long-term future is for TransLink and some of these mega projects that they plan to build when, they've been cut off of money starved of cash for 2, 3, 4 months.
Yeah, it's interesting. And in government and in business, it's also, there's capital and then there's cash flow. And so the challenge of TransLink right now is cash flow. They don't have any riders. They're not getting their predictable revenue that they would be hoping for. However, what I think you'll see from federal and provincial governments moving forward will be significant capital investment in massive projects that are shovel ready. And one thing TransLink has going for it, partly because of the process we went through for the last 5 years, is a lot of shovel ready projects. We've got several routes. We've got the Broadway line, which can be expanded to UBC. That's not been approved, but certainly that's an opportunity to throw some cash at that program. We've got the Surrey SkyTrain to Langley or beyond. We've got the West Coast Express expansion possibilities. There are lots. There's a high-speed train to Seattle. I can see that being a potential with a partnership with the Washington State.
The gondola?
Capital projects. What's that?
The gondola?
Yeah. Gondola, great project, very efficient, cheap. That was absolutely a good project on many levels, especially I don't know if you've heard the data on universities and colleges. There's a significant number of applications from students trying to get into university and colleges now because they're, I look at my kids, they're 20, my older kids, 24 and 19, and they were working, and the 19-year-old was thinking he was going to be a rock star, and now he's going, okay, maybe I should just go back to school. I'm like, I think maybe that.
Good job.
No, he's a good musician. He can be a rock star as long as he makes a lot of money. I'm fine. It's interesting to see. I think that's where TransLink and all these, and I think TransLink of all the, organizations running transit across the country are best positioned to capitalize on capital from the federal provincial government. So I think while Kevin Desmond has proven to be a good leader, the reliance on that cash flow is important, but I think they're probably calmer than they might have been if they knew they didn't have that capital wouldn't be coming. Now, of course, brings back the question always, sure, you can invest in capital projects from the government. Where's all this money coming from? And that's the pressure that Trudeau's getting right now. Yeah, and the province will soon. Is okay, how much debt are we going into to deal with this virus and now the aftermath of the virus and these capital projects, and what's that going to cost? How many generations will it take to pay that down? These are questions that are being addressed, and I've noticed Trudeau is very much sidestepping, never answering that question. He's been asked several times at those press conferences about where the money will come from. And of course, he always pivots, saying, we're in a crisis, we're dealing with this now. Of course, we're thinking about that, but we have to just deal with this day to day, yada, yada, yada. And then, what do? You can't push them too hard because you're like, we're all going, yeah, we are in a crisis. This is the one time when crisis is an actual word that actually does exist, as opposed to the BS crisis that so many city councils and governments have put on the table. We're in this crisis, that crisis. No, not a crisis. That's not a real crisis. This is a real crisis.
Yes, yeah. And then they deal with numbers like the CERB has 1 million more people who have applied for it than are actually unemployed, according to StatsCan. So there's a breakdown there. What's happening there? There's issues all over the place.
They'll get theirs, though, when they file their taxes. That's the good thing with that CERB program is you can't hide from that. If you end up making money somewhere else, or unless you're taking money under the table, you'll get caught. Yeah. So I wouldn't take that risk if I was those people.
Yeah. No one can handle cash anymore. You know that. There's no money under the table. You mentioned universities. That's a good point. They'll be in a good position as well. When Trinity Western first started planning a university district in Langley, I did a lot of research around this, and they're called gown towns. And in recessions, they perform, several multiple times better than non-university towns because recession hits, kids go back to school, upgrade their skills, and then that kind of powers you through the recession. So there is a lot of research around that for sure.
Yeah.
Anything else on the Great Reopen you want to talk about? I know we have an office here in Metrotown. I've been kind of walking through the mall a little bit. I can tell you that there were 2 shoe stores and a clothing store open yesterday to go with the vitamin supplement place. So slowly but surely, the Apple store had, it looked like an employee staff meeting, all in matching Apple masks, all socially distant, as someone who I presume to be their boss was talking to them. So seems like here at Metrotown, we're expecting probably by the weekend to see, the majority of stores to be open.
You certainly notice it on the streets and driving around. It's getting back to the normal congestion levels when you're on your usual routes that you might take. I know that we're opening my office up tomorrow with my staff, and we've had to go through the the whole WorkSafe system, which is quite onerous. And there's a lot of things you got to do. Put tape on the floor for arrows and put up signs and close your kitchen. No coffee machines in the office. All these kinds of things. You're like, really? And even staff are kind of like. But you have to follow these rules because if one staff reports you can get a lot of trouble, a lot of liability potential there. So I would recommend that anybody who's thinking of opening up their office go to that WorkSafe site and make sure you follow those rules because they're stringent. They're not actually that stringent, but they're just kind of like, really, I can't have a coffee machine in the office, but that's the rule. And the arrows on the floor. I mean, can I just tell my team to go left? Right?
Yeah.
But you don't follow these rules. But that kind of stuff is all kind of weird in this whole world we live in. But I must say, I was out the other night with the family. We went down to the beach to watch the flyover as a memorial for the pilot that crashed and died. Everybody was very, very well spaced out. I have found the social shaming of people out and about. Because if you look at a crowd from, I think you actually tweeted this. If you look at a crowd from a ground level, it looks different than it does from the sky. And I think people have been, I live around in Yaletown. There's lots of parks, and I haven't seen that kind of crowding. Certainly, there's groups of 6 or 8 people, but that's their decision.
Yep. That's their circle of trust, of zone of contamination, or whatever you want to call it. Their bubble.
Yeah. So, but I haven't seen that kind of, so it's interesting today that the face mask rule, the federal leaders saying we should all wear face masks if we think we're going to be 2 meters away from each other. I don't know. I've seen a lot of people in face masks, but walking outside, I don't really understand. I mean, I think Bonnie Henry's been quite clear about like the infinitesimal chance of catching it through outside activities. And I think our data is proving that. We have not been so stringent on these rules in BC, on face masks, on all of this stuff. On construction industry continues forward. We haven't seen any breakouts in that. I think that we've kind of played this game was pretty good. And so I worry when the federal government's saying we have to wear face masks. I'm going, well, we have data that shows that hasn't made it, that we're doing okay and we don't have to live in that kind of life. Try to have as normal the world as possible because it's all pretty weird right now.
Yeah, no one's going to talk to. In BC, none of us are taking the federal guidance above Dr. Bonnie. Like Dr. Bonnie is God in this situation, and we'll listen to her commandments. Like Theresa Tam today was apologize. No, she didn't apologize, but she retracted and said, well, in hindsight, we probably should have closed the borders sooner. Yeah, no kidding. I mean, even Adrian Dix was beating that drum for quite a while. When it was suggested, Dr. Tam actually called people who suggested racist. Like, it was a real problem on social media. Now she's reversed herself on masks again. So that doesn't build a lot of confidence in the federal regime. But fortunately, here in BC, we do have Dr. Bonnie, who, like I said, gets listened
to. As an ex-politician, though, that game of knowing when the timing is right to do something. And I think that's a tough decision to close borders. Politically, when do you make that decision? I think that BC was harder on that at the beginning because I think the disease was here earlier. We were facing it earlier, so we were going, this is going to be bad, you guys. Like are you not taking? I think we were about 2 weeks ahead of the rest of the country. And so if you're gauging public sentiment from the East Coast at that time, you would not have, it would have been, I was actually in LA the week before we shut down everything. And you'd think that LA would have been on the same sort of timeline as us. And I was just there, I had booked this trip, and, we said, oh, well, let's go. We kind of knew it was maybe risky, but it was allowed. So we went for 3 days. It was weird because we were in the middle of toilet paper wars here, and that hadn't begun there. And I was talking to a friend there, and they were saying, toilet paper wars, what are you talking about? And I described the situation. We came home a week later, and they were sending me photos from LA of the toilet paper wars had begun. And so I think we were in BC. We were ahead of the curve, as it were, as far as of this whole thing, because we were getting it first. Washington State, that whole mess. We saw that happening there, and so we were more willing, as people, to accept this new world we had to live in. Whereas I think in Ottawa they were going, no, maybe it won't. Maybe it'll pass by. Maybe this won't happen. Yeah, and I think that's why they delayed.
Yeah, and kind of ironically, a lot of the incursions into Canada didn't come from China. The disease didn't come from China as much as it did from New York. It was really New York that spread it to the continent. So,
yeah, and Florida, and then to New York from Europe, as opposed, they closed the borders to China, and Trump takes credit for that, but he refused to close the borders to Europe, which could that be a racist sentiment? I don't know. It could be an argument for it, but I think it's also, you thought, well, yeah, it was a China thing. It was happening in China, and we didn't see it happening. It's sort of starting in Europe, and I think that, again, it goes back to that delay and that politics of decision-making, of sensing, when can I make this move so I don't get destroyed politically. These are things that politicians have to deal with all the time, and it can make you a rock star or it can kill you. You never know.
Two pet peeves I have right now in the COVID coverage world. Number one, you touched on the pictures from ground level of what appear to be unspaced people. There was a great Twitter thread, Francis Bula linked to it, of showing the picture and then a drone overhead picture, and then all these people are completely distanced. I do not want to see any more pictures on social media of crowded areas. I don't care. Even if they are crowded, that's their problem, not mine. Forget it. None of that. That drives me crazy. And no
more haircuts. No more haircuts, please. I don't want to hear about your haircuts. Stop with the haircut photos. And I don't need to know what 10 albums you love either. I don't need that either.
Which 3 of these 9 things would you pick? What about that? Would you like that meme?
No. Stop with these.
Those are the worst. And then the other thing is, there's just this little sliver of doubt. We talk about how great Dr. Bonnie's been and how everything's been hunky-dory and we should listen to Dr. Bonnie. And then we talk about reopening schools. And all of a sudden it was record scratch. Whoa, Dr. Bonnie, have you lost your mind? We can't open schools. We are very much school people. We're going to send the kids to, their day or 2 or whatever they get to get. Especially the 10-year-old. Yeah, especially the 10-year-old. He's there, baby. We'd send him now if we could. But
I just came back from my battle on the daily math battle with my 12-year-old. I'm like, no, you have to do this. It's you could do this. Just do it. Just do it.
But don't you find it weird, George? We trust her, and then school, and then there's this whoa, that's a step too far. I'm not doing it.
I know. I find this curious, this whole school thing, because I have one of my staff has her son in daycare, private daycare, 12 kids or 14 kids. They didn't stop, and there are no problems, and the kids are all hugging and kissing and all over each other, because that's a 5-year-old to do. Yeah. And there's no data that's showing. I mean, there is this worry about adults getting it and spreading that thing, but you as a parent can make a decision. A decision about, okay, grandma's, we don't want grandma to get sick, but I think most people are separating themselves from grandma for the foreseeable future. And so if you're a young family with young kids, the data is just not there for to be so concerned. And, I just find it curious that there's this real worry over schools. Yeah. And I think it's really, really challenging for us to get back to work if we have to take and school our kids. And I think I talked about this last week with Jody, but it's really frustrating as a parent. I mean, we're now sharing day, so today's my day at home. I don't want to be a teacher. I chose not to be a teacher. I'm pretty sure I'm not a good teacher. I'm sure my son would tell me that. My other older kids are like, thank God you weren't, we dodged a bullet with that one, Dad. But it's just not my thing, and I don't have the patience for it. it's so, and the pile of stuff that I'm getting now from, I don't know what it's like where you are, but this is too much.
Yep.
Too much. I don't even understand half this stuff, and I have to learn it, and I don't really understand the whole process of why this has become so heavy on the parents. And even Adrian Dick said early on, if it's too much, don't worry about it. It's the parents. If you just don't worry about it. But what do you mean? Of course I have to worry about it. My kids, they have to get, my kid's going into grade 7 next year. He needs to be at a certain level. This is the rules. He shows up in grade 7 and he's like grade 3 math. That's not going to happen.
Yeah.
So it's a bit bizarre. And I do know that private schools have been operating differently than public schools. They are where they have their online platforms on all the time, where you sit, these kids sit, and the teacher's there, and you put up your hand and say, hey, I got a question. Public schools, at least in my neighborhood, aren't doing that. I don't know about yours.
Why couldn't we do that, though? Why didn't they do that? It's crazy. So I bet 90% of the disagreements my wife and I have had over this thing have revolved around school. And it comes down to, I'm a pragmatic learner. Like Jack, you hate art. Don't do art. I'm not going to fight with you about drawing a picture, of a friggin' Lion Witch in the Wardrobe thing. Just read Lion Witch in the Wardrobe and love Lion Witch in the Wardrobe because I love it. I don't care if you don't want to draw the picture. I get it. You hate art. But it's an assignment, George, so he's got to do it. He's got to get the little tick box. But he's already been promoted to grade 5. I don't understand. So this is the discussion we have at home. And like I said, I bet you 90% of our disagreements have been over, during COVID, have been over the school strategy.
Yeah, and then the stress, just in general, and if you have like I do, a business, and you're every hour that you're using for teaching your kid school, you're like, it's I need money to pay for my kid's life too, so it's definitely not been a pleasure. In fact, when this first started, we created our own, because there was nothing provided to us, there was no direction, and so I said, okay, well, math, 9:30 to 10:30, reading from 10:30 to 11:30. Then you write an essay from 1 to 2 on what you read in the morning, and then from 2 to 3 you do art or music or whatever you want, but you got to do something for an hour till 3, and it was working great.
Yeah,
my system was working great, and then they brought everything back and they started loading us down with this stuff. I'm like, well, now he's not doing math at all, barely, and I'm thinking the only math, I think that math is one of those things like, oh my God. So many kids, even if they should be smart at math, and they're saying, I'm no good at math. You're like, oh my God, you love computers. You love your brain is totally math. You're just denying it. That we as parents are just not, they're just, that's the only class they should be forced to take every day till. And I said to my son, if you don't do this now, I'm just going to keep you going through this for the summer, because now I got a system. Yeah. So you better learn this now, because otherwise, Dad's summer school is in session.
Dear God. All right. Last thing I want to talk to you about, and I think you and I can have a good discussion on this because we live this life. Municipal politicians, elected officials, it came to light a couple weeks ago that Brad West, the much-loved mayor of Port Coquitlam, had a second job that, he gets paid full-time to be mayor of Port Coquitlam, but he has a second full-time job as a lobbyist communications person for the Steelworkers Union. Now, George, you and I were both municipal councillors. I presume you worked while you were a municipal councillor. I certainly did. Could afford to feed my family on the municipal council salary. So, I don't have a problem with elected officials working on the side as long as they're disclosing clients and, all that kind of conflict of interest stuff. That makes sense. I have a real problem. It changes when you're a mayor making 6 figures, plus committees for GVRD, plus TransLink. And you're being essentially paid for a full-time job. And then you add another full-time job where one of your job descriptions is lobbying. Am I being too hard on the Wild West here, or is this like...
Well, I don't have a problem with the actual amount of money. I mean, to me, it all comes to, it's like the same thing with donations, in political donations. And I had a huge challenge with election finance reform because it just pushed it all on the ground, sets it up for third party, systems and all this thing, which it just makes things more opaque when you create stringent rules. When you're in office and you have in municipal office, and I think you can have a second job. In Vancouver, it's $90,000 to $100,000 a year. So for most of the people that in council, that's the best job they've ever had. But for me, it wasn't. I had a business to run, but I actually took a huge pay cut. I was no way I was taking that kind of money. So I took my salary from my company that I would have been making. Majority of it went to pay for more staff to do the work. And my company, so for me, it was all, 100% transparency. And for me, actually, it hurt my business being in politics. I declined lots of contracts. I said, I don't want to even get into that nightmare because I don't want the perception of conflict to be there. I want to be able to vote on these things. I don't want to be there. So I said no to lots of potential clients. And the clients I did have that were conflicting in any even small way, I was absolutely recused. I recused myself publicly and said why. But the challenge with Brad on this one is that I don't mind that he didn't disclose how much money he's making, and nobody ever asked me how much money I was making from my company, and I didn't have to disclose that. It was clear that I owned the majority of shares of my business. That was transparent, but nobody knew what I was making. That's not required in municipal politics. And in his case, it came out through that third party. I guess it was how did it come out? Through the
Steelworkers filed something in the States.
Public?
Yeah, the Steelworkers filed a document in the States. I thought I used to had to file annual disclosures of income sources. I thought I did.
Sources, but not the amount.
But not the amount. Okay.
Yeah. So it's like telling people how much I made on my stocks this year. I wouldn't want to even just tell anybody that, huh?
Yeah. You made money on a stock? Can you give me the tips?
Yeah. It's called hoping and praying now in my stocks. When you talk about, and McLean wrote a great article for the Orca talking about this, it's really a perception of conflict is conflict in my mind in politics. If there's a perception of conflict, it is therefore a conflict. And the fact that in his title of his other job is lobbying, and he say he doesn't do lobbying, and then we draw attention to the fact that the steel workers have been very vocal about the China stuff, and that's their biggest competition. And then where's Brad? It as much as you might appreciate Brad's position on the China thing, it does kind of taint it. Unfortunately, I think it does. I don't know how it can, and it's unfortunate. And I think he could have easily said, "I am a member of this organization. I work for them. It's an important issue for us, and here's why, and here's what I know because I do this." I think that would be more I think people would have been forgiving if he just said, you know what, I'll tell you, let me tell you about China. Let me tell you about what it's like. Let me tell you why I'm concerned about this. This is what I've learned in the last 20 years or 10 years in my job. And this is why one of the reasons why I'm standing up against this. And then we began, okay, that's cool. That's helpful. That helps. That puts things in perspective. He didn't do that. He never talked about it. He hasn't really talked about it since. And he just says, I'm not a lobbyist. But without a doubt, the organization that he was being paid from has a position on the issue that he has become very well known for, along with the casino stuff. So, I think it's damaging to a certain degree. But then he has like a 110% approval rating in this town, I think, and he won by like 80%. And I think locally, but it will haunt him politically. Yeah. If he were to run for the NDP, which I would assume that would be the party he would run with, it's not going to be good for him, for the BC Liberals to use that as a tool against him.
I mean, Big Steel is a huge driver in the Horgan government already. There's multiple political connections. It is an interesting differentiator between him and David Eby if you're really gaming out what a Horgan successor looks like. Normally, you'd say Adrian Dix would be the successor, but of course, he had his kick at the. I was going to say at the cap. I guess he had his kick at the dog. Remember, he could have kicked a dog and still won the election, according to the Vancouver Province. But you're right. It is that perception. If he had disclosed it ahead of time, look, I'm not going to lie. I took a quick look at some of the projects being built in Port Coquitlam to see if the steelworkers were working on them. Didn't see any that jumped out. Ventana is a non-union company. They're doing their big Port Coquitlam Sports Complex, which is a ginormous project for a community that size. So, I don't see like steelworkers getting under the table contracts or anything because of this. But like you say, the China stuff, he's just always been, that is his real regional claim to fame, right? Fighting money laundering and tying it to the which is definitely tied to Chinese issues. And the UBCM thing, don't disagree with the UBCM thing one bit, but now you start to go, this is where this is coming from. And you're right, I think it does sort of taint that public comment. Whereas if you publicly disclose, like, I care about these issues because I've seen, it is funny how that would have changed the perception.
I think that's always the best approach in office is to, be as transparent as possible. It's something I certainly champion. And if you have, it's really everything will be public if you want it to or not. So assume it's going to be. And so therefore, make sure it's better to just to disclose it when you have the chance and give put it into perspective for people. If it makes sense, to you, why, whatever it is that you think and there's a reason, just have that, explain that. So I think it's an interesting challenge, but that being said, about he's still proving to be a very nimble politician locally too, and I think that is what I'm looking for in any politician, especially on the local level, is okay, focus on the work. While he's had this big picture, and that sort of ties to this stuff maybe, but what he's done though locally is what I think all politicians on a municipal level should be doing, and not all are, especially in Vancouver. I don't get the sense that there's that happening in Vancouver, and so for me, as a former councillor in Vancouver, it's very frustrating, and as a resident of Vancouver. So I don't know what it's like out in Langley and the burbs out there, but I'm not seeing it here in Vancouver, that kind of nimbleness.
No, I gotta say though, being a former councillor, as you and I can probably attest, it's like being a backup goalie or a backup quarterback. You're the most popular guy on the team because you don't have to do anything, right? This has been good. I've enjoyed my retirement from politics. And are you at the point, George, where every time there's a political opening on the center right in Vancouver, you get a phone call or you get the nudge or you get the tweet you're running, right? That's
I get it a lot. I got it a lot in the federal election for sure. And I've never said I'm not going to run, and I'm certainly thinking about it. But we'll see. I think it's my favorite hobby, politics. And so if they want to pay me for it, then I'm interested. Yeah. But I still have a business to run, and so I think for now it's definitely something I'm considering for the future. But and maybe are you?
I'm kind of like you. It's nice to be asked. Maybe if I was being paid like Brad West was, we'd have a different conversation. But, when you're in public life, you make a lot of sacrifices personally and financially, unless you're corrupt. In which case, and I was never corrupt enough really to gain those kind of wonderful things.
I can never figure out how these guys how the corruptness works.
No, exactly.
It's always a big mystery. I was like,
exactly.
How do you become?
People would tweet like Mike DeYoung and Rich Coleman are so corrupt. They're making, and then I'd look and I'd be like, Mike DeYoung's driven the same Mazda Miata for 25 years, and Rich Coleman, when he's in Victoria, lives in a trailer. Like, if they're corrupt, they're not doing a great job of this. This is not.
I made a commitment to keep my 2003 Sienna till all the kids were grown up because I don't want to buy another minivan. Swear to God, no more minivans. This will be my last minivan.
We're the same way. I got a 2009 that we're just like, we gotta wait. We gotta get these kids out the door. Okay, that is good stuff. George, thanks for joining the Hotstove. We appreciate it. Love what you do on Unspun. Of course, you can follow George at George _. He said it. He said it, McLean. It's happening. He said _ on the Hotstove. I can't believe it. I'm just proud of us. We managed to navigate this through without Jody McLean, talking us off a cliff, which is normally what happens. There's a lot of discussion that this would be a very bombastic episode. And I'm like, no, George and I are pros. We're good.
Level-headed guys with lots to say.
That's right, absolutely. So this weekend you can watch Unspun with McLean and Jody. I don't know who's going to have the hot takes based in that episode, but I'll bet McLean. I bet you McLean has a hot take or two up his sleeve.
I just want to know if he's going to wear his Mickey Mouse ears for Jody. I think she's going to put the kibosh on the Mickey Mouse ears for Unspun. It's just not our look. It's not our look, McLean.
It's noise canceling. That's why we wear them.
What's so noisy? Where are you? You're like, come on.
He's like a small child.
I heard his ear holes are too big for pods. That's why.
Yeah, you're right. He did mention that.
He's got to get ear hole expanders or something. I don't know.
He's really into wearing the ties right now on the show, which I feel like it's just a shot at me being slobby, but I don't care because I do this for free. So what's he gonna do? Fire me? Come on, it's all good. So
he's wearing ties. He's got ginch on. He's got underwear below. So just know that.
Perfect.
At least you're wearing pants, right?
Perfect. Now next week you'll be on Hotstove with him, you'll be on Hotstove with McLean, and I'll be on Unspun with Jody. So
is that what's happening?
Yeah. Any advice for me on? Okay. Can I get Jody really wound up about Kitsilano life? Is that a?
Yes. No. You can always get her. Just ask about hot dogs and baseball and parks.
Okay. Good. Done. I will do my best to rile her up and then send her back to you to sort out after the fact.
Thanks.
All right. Thanks for watching, everyone. That was Hotstove. We'll see you all next week.